My harness went cold like somebody cracked an ice pack across my kidneys. Not damp, not sweaty, cold in a way your body understands before your brain does, like river water, straight off the bottom, poured down the back of my shirt while I was hanging in open air. I was 50-something feet under a bridge deck at 10 in the damn morning. Clear sky, sun in my eyes every time I shifted and caught a slice of glare off the water. Cars rolling overhead. A jogger pausing on the walkway to film us like we were street performers. Normal noise, normal light, and that cold kept spreading inside my webbing like something had found a seam and decided to crawl. I locked both hands around my rope and stopped moving because rope access teaches you this early. Panic doesn't get you safe, panic gets you fast. Fast is how you die. I pressed my cheek against steel and listened to my own breathing, trying to slow it down. The bridge vibrated under the traffic, that constant low hum that turns into a drumbeat when a bus hits the expansion joint. Smelled like hot metal, old pigeon shit, and river algae baking in the sun. The coal behind me didn't smell like anything. This job was supposed to be a cakewalk. Structural inspection, city contract. We were there because 3 people had fallen off the pedestrian side in 2 months. Felt like gravity suddenly got hungry. The city wanted photos, measurements, a report that said no immediate hazard so they could sleep at night and avoid a lawsuit. My supervisor, Dean, ran our crew like every second was money leaking out of his pocket. Dean didn't whisper. Dean didn't ask. Dean barked. He had that kind of confidence that only comes from being sure the consequences always happen to somebody else. We staged on the East Tower. Maintenance room was a concrete closet tucked behind a locked steel door with a keypad that never worked right. Smelled like bleach, rust, and old electrical heat. There was a cabinet in there full of cones, faded harnesses, and first aid supplies that looked like they'd been packed before people started suing over expired aspirin. I was grabbing extra gloves when I saw it. A laminated card zip-tied to the inside of the cabinet, shoved behind the first aid box like somebody didn't want it obvious but didn't have the heart to throw it away. No logo, no letteridad, just thick black marker on plastic. Read this before you go over. If you don't, that's on you. 5 lines underneath it, numbered, written with the kind of tight, shaky pressure you get when your hand won't stop trembling. Rule 1, don't whistle on the bridge. Not you, not your radio, not through your teeth. Rule 2, don't count anything. Bolts, steps, cars, people. If you start counting, bite your tongue. Rule 3, do not clip an anchor 7 on the east plate. If that's all you've got, you pack up and leave. Rule 4, if you see a shoe tied up anywhere, you cut it down, bag it, and you do not throw it in the water. Rule 5, if your harness gets wet, you freeze. You climb up without looking down. You don't check it. You don't just peek. You climb. On the bottom, smaller, like a note somebody didn't want to admit to writing. It doesn't want to kill you. It wants you to say yes. I stared at that last line until my eyes started doing that stupid thing where the words blur and you can't tell if it's fear or the fluorescent lights flickering. I worked around old men with superstitions. I've heard guys blame bad luck for sloppy rigging. This didn't read like macho nonsense. This read like someone who'd watched a person disappear and was trying to put a fence around the memory. I pulled the card off the cabinet and ran my thumb across the laminate. There was a greasy fingerprint smear along the edge, like it had been handled a lot. Like it had been taken down, read again, put back. Behind me, the door clanged. Dean came in, saw me holding it, and made a noise in the back of his throat. "What the hell is that?" he said, like he already knew and wanted to mock it out of existence. "Found it in the cabinet," I said. My voice came out flatter than I meant. Somebody wrote rules. Dean snatched it out of my hand. He read the first line and smirked like he'd found a joke. "Don't whistle," he read aloud, loud as always. "Oh no, the bridge ghost will get me. Don't read it out loud," I said before I could stop myself. It came out sharper than polite. Dean's eyes flicked up. He hated being corrected, especially by me. "Are you serious?" "Just don't," I said. "Whoever wrote it. Whoever wrote it was a pussy," Dean said. and he threw it back into the cabinet like it was trash. Grab your gear. City wants us moving. We're behind already. I hesitated, then reached past him and took it back out. I didn't tuck it in the cabinet. I slid it into my chest pocket like I was stealing contraband. Dean saw and rolled his eyes. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Don't start being weird. We got a contract. That line, don't start being weird, stuck in my head. Like weird was a choice. Like the bridge gave a shit what we believed. Outside, the walkway was packed with sunlight. River under us looked like dirty glass. Tour boats cut slow white wakes. Wind came up the channel and slapped the orange caution tape we'd put up. People leaned on the railings to watch. Phones out, smiling. Like hanging off a bridge for a living was entertainment. We rigged on the east plate where the anchor bolts sat in a neat row, numbers stamped on a steel tag. The city's plate. Official. Clean. There were 8 points with big eye bolts, each one labeled. 5, 6, 7, 8 across the top. 1 through 4 on the lower bar. My eyes went straight to 7 like it had a magnet in it. Carlos, my partner, was setting his rope bag down. Carlos had done this longer than I had, and he wasn't jumpy, but he did this thing where he watched shadows a little too long. He saw my face and followed my gaze to the plate. Don't, he said quietly. You've seen that card? I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just clipped his lanyard to 6 like he had muscle memory. Then he leaned in low, so Dean couldn't hear. Not a card, Carlos said. A maintenance guy told me. Years ago. Said don't fuck with 7 on the east. Said the river under this side isn't right. Dean shouted from behind us. Hey, stop having secrets. Let's go. I'm not paying you to sightsee. Carlos straightened up and gave Dean a look that had no humor in it. Dean either didn't see it or didn't care. We split the work. Carlos got mid-span underside. I got the east hangers and gusset plates under the tower. Dean stayed topside to coordinate, which meant he wasn't going over if he could help it. He called it management. I called it fear dressed up as leadership. I did my checks. Harness buckles. Bike nut. Descender. Cow's tail. Helmet strap. Radio clipped high. I touched the laminated card in my chest pocket like it was a good luck charm, which pissed me off because I'm not the kind of guy who needs charms. Then I swung my leg over the rail and dropped myself into air. That first moment always hits, no matter how many times you do it. Your stomach gets left behind for a second. Your body wants to cling. Then the rope loads and you settle into it, and it becomes work again. Under the deck, the world changed. Sunlight cut into strips through the gaps. Steel beams ran like ribs. Pigeon nests jammed into corners. The underside was coated in a layer of grime that turned your gloves black in 5 minutes. I moved hand over hand, slow and steady, positioning myself under each hanger bracket. Took photos, tapped with my hammer, checked for corrosion and cracks. Wrote notes on a wrist pad with a little pencil tied on a string. Normal. Then I heard something thin and sharp under the normal. A whistle. Not loud. Not a person whistling a tune. More like air being forced through a narrow slot. A high note that came from right below my boots. My body reacted before my brain finished naming it. My throat locked. I stopped exhaling through my mouth and forced my breath through my nose like a scared animal. I froze. That whistle paused, like it was listening for an answer. My radio crackled. Dean's voice came through, loud in my ear. Status. I didn't answer. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want the shape of my mouth to make anything even close to a whistle. Dean repeated himself, impatient. The whistle below shifted tiny changes in pitch like it was tuning itself. I coughed. A rough hack. Something that didn't sound like a whistle. My throat felt raw just doing it. The whistle stopped. I stayed frozen a second longer, waiting for my own adrenaline to stop dumping into my arms. Then I started moving again, slower than before, more careful with every tiny scrape my gear made against steel. I tried to tell myself it was wind or a vent or the bridge singing. Bridges do that. Steel makes weird noises. You hear tones and you don't think too hard. But that rule card had already dug a groove in my brain, and every sound wanted to slide into it. I shifted to the next bracket. My boot brushed something soft. It took my brain half a second to process that soft doesn't exist under a steel bridge. I looked down at the beam, not at the river, and saw a sneaker tied by its laces to a little drainage grate. A kid-sized sneaker, sun-faded, the fabric so bleached it looked gray. The knot was neat, like somebody had taken their time, like a little ritual. My stomach tightened. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I wanted it to not be real. But Rule 4 was right there in my pocket, practically vibrating. I clipped my positioning lanyard, braced myself, and took my knife out. My gloves squeaked against the laces. I cut them in one motion and caught the sneaker before it could drop. For a stupid second, I thought about throwing it, just getting rid of it. Then that last line, "I want you to say yes," flickered through my head and made my skin go tight. I stuffed the sneaker into a trash bag in my pouch, like it was evidence, and zipped it shut. I didn't let it swing. I didn't look toward the water. I kept my eyes on dead metal, like it was a promise. Dean's voice came through again. "What are you doing down there? You taking a nap?" I pressed the radio button with my thumb and forced my words out without letting my lips purse. "Found debris. Bagging it." "Debris?" Dean said. "Jesus, leave it. We're not a cleanup crew. It's tied up," I said, and I heard the edge in my own voice. "It's not random." Dean snorted. "Everything's random. That's the world. Hurry the fuck up." He let go of the channel, and the radio hissed back into static. I went back to work because what else do you do? You're hanging under a bridge. You can't argue with your boss from midair. You just do your job and try not to die. I tapped a hanger bracket with my hammer. Top! A beat later, something tapped back. Not vibration, not echo. A second tap, slightly off rhythm, like someone waited for me to finish. My scalp prickled under my helmet. I tapped again, softer like a test. Top! Top! Again, delayed. Again, not matching my force. Like something was copying me. Rule 5 wasn't about tapping, but the card had said, if the bridge answers, don't keep talking. And my hammer was talking. I stopped tapping. I took photos instead. Lots of them. Close-ups, wide shots, serial numbers, rust blooms. Anything to look busy while I listened. And I started noticing other sounds. Little clicks under the deck that didn't match traffic rhythm. Tiny scratches like fingernails dragged lightly over steel. A soft, wet sound somewhere below, like fabric being wrung out. I kept telling myself it was pigeons. It was wind. It was loose debris shifting. The truth was I didn't believe myself. The cold started about 10 minutes after the shoe. First I thought I'd sweat and the wind cooled it. Then it got colder, fast, like something poured down my back. It soaked the harness webbing right where it crossed my lower spine. I felt the weight of it, the way wet fabric drags and clings. Felt it creep sideways along my waist strap. My whole body locked. My hands tightened on the rope, so hard my forearms cramped. Rule 5. If your harness gets wet, you freeze. I froze. I stared at the beam in front of my face. A streak of old paint, bubbled and flaking. A rivet head with a ring of rust. I focused on it like it was a prayer. I did not look down. I did not look toward the river. I didn't even look at my harness. Because the urge to check was huge. Your brain screams to verify. It wants to see the problem so it can solve it. Except some problems aren't solved by seeing them. Some problems get worse the moment you acknowledge them. The cold moved. It slid down along the harness like a hand. Like something was finding the straps and following them, testing the buckles, feeling where the webbing pressed into my hips. My throat went dry. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I could taste metal, pennies, and fear. My radio hissed. No voice, just a wash of static that rose like a wave. It sounded almost like breath. Then Dean's voice cut through, but it wasn't coming through clean. It sounded too close, like he was leaning in against my ear. Eli, it said. My name, said with the exact cadence Dean used when he was pissed. Like he caught me slacking. Except Dean was 50 feet above me on a sunlit walkway. My stomach dropped. I didn't answer. I didn't press the button. I didn't whisper. I didn't do anything that could be interpreted as a yes. I started climbing. Slow, controlled. I set my ascender, tested it, moved up a foot at a time. Hands steady, even while my brain rattled in my skull. The cold tightened around my waist strap. Not like water soaking cloth. Like something cinching. Like a belt being pulled, firm and deliberate. I grunted and climbed harder. My shoulder burned. My harness creaked. My rope ran through my device with that smooth, familiar tension. Behind me, the cold slid higher under my shoulder straps like it wanted to wrap around my chest. I kept my chin tucked and my eyes on steel. I heard a faint tapping then, far below, and the rhythm wasn't random. Talp, talp, talp. 3. Pause. Talp, talp, talp. My brain tried to count it. I bit down on my tongue, so hard my eyes watered. Tasted blood. The pain helped. Pain gave me something real. I climbed faster. Light widened above as I neared the underside edge. Sun poured through like a curtain. In my peripheral vision, I saw the river's brightness trying to pull my gaze down like a magnet. I refused. I got my glove up to the lip of the walkway and grabbed a beam to steady myself. My glove stuck, not to rust, not to paint, to something slick and warm. I jerked my hand back and looked at the glove. Only the glove, and saw thin, wet fibers clinging to it. Pale strands like tendon threads, stretching and snapping as they tried to pull back toward the edge. My stomach rolled. I wiped my glove against my pants like that would fix anything. The fibers smeared, left faint streaks like egg white, then pulled inward, like they wanted to gather back into a line. I didn't wait to see more. I hauled myself up onto the walkway with a burst of strength that shocked me. Boots hit concrete. I stood too fast. My head spun. The cold on my back stopped instantly the moment my weight came off the rope and onto the deck. Like something had let go because I'd followed the procedure. Or because it was letting me live. Carlos was there already. Not near the edge. A few steps back, like the air by the railing had teeth. His face was pale under his helmet. He wasn't sweating much, but his eyes looked overworked, like he'd been staring at something that didn't want to be stared at. He pointed with his chin toward the pedestrian's side, not saying a word at first. 3 shoes hung by their laces from the railing like trophies. Different sizes, different styles. One was a heavy work boot, which made my chest tighten because that wasn't a kid's shoe. One of them sagged in a way that suggested something heavy had once been in it, like the memory of a foot. Dean was standing there with his clipboard tucked under his arm, jaw set, impatient even in the face of weird. He glanced at me and immediately started in. "What the hell took so long?" he snapped. I didn't give him a calm explanation. I was still vibrating inside, still feeling phantom cold on my spine. I dug the laminated card out of my chest pocket and shoved it toward him. Somebody left rules. They match what's happening down there. Dean didn't take it. He looked at it like it was contaminated. "Rules," he repeated. Contempt thick. "You really bought into this?" "Read it," I said. My voice went hard. "And stop acting like a fucking teenager." Carlos made a sound. Half a laugh, half a cough. Not amused. More like disbelief. Dean's eyes flicked between us. And for a second, I saw irritation turn into something else. Not fear. Not yet. More like the unease of a man realizing the room might not bend to his will. He snatched the card from my hand. He scanned it, scoffed at every line, and when he got to Anchor 7, he laughed. "Oh my God," he said. "Anchor 7. This is like haunted house shit. You guys want to go home, just say it. Don't make up ghost rules." "It's not an excuse," I said. My harness got wet down there. Dean opened his mouth, ready to talk over me, then shut it and looked at my harness like he could see the dampness from here. "Wet," he said. "You pissed yourself?" Carlos's face tightened. "Dean, shut up." Dean snapped his eyes to Carlos. "Don't tell me to shut up." "Then stop making everything a dick-measuring contest," Carlos shot back. "You're not the one hanging." Dean stepped closer, chest out like he wanted the argument to turn physical. His voice got louder like louder could win. "You think I'm scared of a bridge?" he said. "You think I'm going to lose a contract because you two got spooked by pigeons and trash?" "Those shoes aren't trash," I said, and I surprised myself with how calm it came out. Cold anger. "And don't clip into 7. Dean smirked. "I'll clip into whatever I want. It's my site." "Read the fucking card," Carlos said, sharp. "And don't say it out loud." Dean held up the laminated card like a prop. "Don't whistle," he read, mocking, voice carrying. "Don't count. Don't clip into." "Stop," I said, and it came out like an order. Dean's eyes flashed. He loved being challenged because it gave him a reason to prove himself. He put the card down on the equipment case like he was done with it, and then he leaned toward the edge, and he whistled. Not a tune, not a long note, just one sharp whistle, short, clean, the exact kind of whistle you use to call somebody over like a dog. My blood went cold again, not from the harness this time, from knowing. For half a second, nothing happened. Cars rolled. Wind flapped tape. A jogger laughed at something in their earbuds. Then the bridge answered. A whistle rose from underneath the deck, directly below us, louder and sweeter than Dean's. Like his whistle was the question, and the bridge's whistle was the perfect reply. Dean's smirk faded. His eyes went wide, just a fraction. Confusion crossed his face, pure and honest, because his joke had just gotten taken seriously by something that didn't understand humor. His clipboard slipped from his arm and clattered on the concrete. The sound snapped him out of it. He forced a laugh. "Okay," he said too loud. "Wind. That's wind. You guys are." The whistle below continued, soft now, like it was lingering, like it was waiting to see if Dean would answer again. Dean's jaw worked. He hated being wrong. He hated the idea that anything could make him hesitate. He stomped toward the anchor plate like he was going to reassert control with hardware. He jabbed a finger at the eye bolts like he was giving a safety lecture. "This is steel," he said. "This is engineering. There's no." His finger hovered over 7. "Don't," I said. He looked at me with that exact face of a man deciding to do the thing you told him not to do just because you told him not to do it. He clipped his carabiner into anchor 7. The gate snapped shut, and the anchor plate made a sound like a wet throat clearing. Not metal, not creak. Vet. Dean froze with his hand still on the carabiner. His shoulders stiffened. The back of his harness darkened in a spreading stain, like river water soaking fabric. He blinked fast like something got in his eyes. Then his gaze dropped, not all the way down, just a flick, a reflex glance past the railing. And I watched his face change like someone had hit a switch inside his skull. His mouth opened slightly. His lips glistened. For a disgusting second, I thought he was about to laugh, but it wasn't that. It was recognition. His eyes unfocused like he was staring at something only he could see. Then he smiled. Not warm, not happy. A smile like he'd just remembered a promise. He started counting. At first it was low, breath level. 1. Carlos lunged for him, grabbed his shoulder, tried to pull him back. Dean shrugged him off like Carlos weighed nothing. Dean's voice got louder as he counted. 3, 4. "Stop," Carlos barked. "Stop counting." Dean didn't hear him. Or he did, and it didn't matter. My hands moved before my brain finished thinking. I grabbed the backstrap of Dean's harness with both fists and yanked. His body didn't move the way a body should. It pulled back. Not muscle, not balance. Like something on the other side of him was pulling too. Dean laughed, a wet, breathy sound, and his feet slid toward the railing. Not a stumble, a smooth drag, like the ground had turned into a conveyor belt. Carlos grabbed the rope and tried to lock it off at the device. The rope burned through his gloves instantly. Not friction heat, wet heat, like the fibers were alive and angry. Carlos screamed and let go. His gloves smoked. His palms were red and raw, skin peeling where the heat had kissed it. Dean hit 7, voice rising on the number like it mattered, and his body leaned forward with a certainty that didn't belong to him. I braced and pulled with everything I had. My boots slid. My knees slammed the concrete. I felt the harness webbing cut into my fingers. Dean's weight went over the rail. Not a fall, not a sudden drop. A slow, smooth slide like the bridge was lowering him by hand. Dean didn't fight to stay on the walkway. He fought to go. His fingers reached toward the air like he wanted to touch the whistle. He made a sound that might have been joy if joy was allowed to sound like that. I refused to look down. I stared at the concrete and my own boots at the shadow line of the railing. The river's brightness tried to drag my eyes anyway, like a reflex, like a lure. The moment I felt my grip slip, I let go. Not because I gave up, because Rule 5 was screaming in my head, and because my body understood something my pride didn't. If I kept pulling, I'd go too. I'd finish the drop. Dean's counting cut off mid-breath. Then something came up from below, a wet, satisfied sound like a belt being unbuckled, like a mouth closing. And then there was just traffic again. Wind, city noise, like the bridge had taken a bite and gone back to pretending it was a structure. Carlos was on his knees, shaking, staring at his hands like he couldn't believe they still existed. He kept trying to wipe them on his pants, smearing burned skin and melted glove rubber. The jogger who'd been filming screamed from the other side of the tape. People rushed toward the railing. Phones went higher. A woman shouted, "Oh my God," over and over like it was a spell. Dean was gone. No rope snapped. No hardware failed. No dramatic swing. Just gone. My brain tried to make a story that made sense. Rope slipped. Harness failure. Supervisor error. But my spine remembered cold water and sunlight, and my ears remembered a whistle answering back. I grabbed the laminated card off the equipment case with my shaking hand and jammed it into my pocket. The plastic felt warm now, like it had been against a body too long. Carlos looked up at me, eyes wet, furious. "We have to go," he rasped. Dean's radio, still clipped to the case, crackled. For a second, the static sounded like breathing. Then Dean's voice came through, clear as day, calm, right tone, like he was standing behind us. "Eli," it said, using my name the same way it had under the deck. Every hair on my arms lifted. Carlos heard it too. His face turned gray. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at the radio. I reached over, turned it off, and ripped the battery out like it was a live snake. The whistle underneath the bridge rose again, faint and patient, waiting, asking, and all around us, people crowded the railing to look down, because that's what people do. They look, they confirm, they feed the thing that wants agreement. I grabbed Carlos by his harness shoulder strap and hauled him up. "Move," I said low. "Now." He stumbled with me, clutching his hands to his chest, teeth bared like he was holding back a scream. Dean's clipboard lay on the concrete near the anchor plate. Paper scattered in the wind. On the top sheet, in his angry block handwriting, he'd written the bolt numbers he wanted checked next. 5, 6, 7, 8. His pen had circled 7 so hard the paper tore. I snatched the sheet without thinking and shoved it into my bag. I don't know why. Maybe because if I left it, the wind would take it, and I couldn't stand the idea of that number flying free. Maybe because some part of me wanted proof I wasn't insane. Some uniformed city maintenance guy ran up, face pale, asking what happened. His mouth moved. I could see questions, panic, liability pouring out. I didn't answer him. I didn't trust words anymore. I just pointed at the edge, at the empty air where Dean had been, and then I dragged Carlos toward the maintenance door. Behind us, the whistle rose again, and this time it sounded almost pleased, like it had gotten exactly what it wanted. A man who'd said yes without even realizing it. Inside the maintenance room, the fluorescent lights flickered. Carlos leaned against the wall, slid down onto the concrete floor, and stared at his hands. "Those rules," he said, voice broken. "Who wrote them?" I pulled the laminated card out and held it between us like a dirty photograph. "Somebody who survived," I said. Carlos laughed once, sharp. "Dean didn't. He didn't follow them," I said. My voice sounded wrong in my own ears. Too steady, like my brain had decided shaking would waste energy. Carlos's eyes snapped up. "We have to tell someone." "No," I said immediately. "What the fuck do you mean no?" I swallowed. My mouth tasted like blood from where I'd bitten my tongue earlier. The second we say it out loud, it hears us. That's what it wants. Agreement. Attention. Words. Carlos's breathing got fast. He looked like he wanted to punch the wall just to feel something solid. A knock came from the steel door. Not from outside the maintenance room. From inside the cabinet. Top, top. 2 taps. Pause. Top, top. Carlos stared at the cabinet like it was about to open itself. I didn't move. I didn't tap back. The cabinet stayed shut. The tap stopped. Carlos whispered. It followed us. Or it was already here, I said. Outside, sirens started winding up. Police. Fire. Everyone who shows up after the important part is already over. Carlos pushed himself up, wincing as his burned hands flexed. We're leaving. Dean's voice came faint through the concrete, through the bridge, through the building itself, like a memory shoved into a speaker. Eli, it said again. Calm. Patient. My stomach twisted. I turned to Carlos. Don't answer. Don't joke. Don't say his name. We pack and we go, and we don't look down. Carlos nodded hard like he was trying to convince his body to obey. We moved like thieves. Grabbed ropes, bags, devices, hardware. Anything we could without going back near the edge. We didn't argue about leaving tools behind. Tools were replaceable. We weren't. As we shoved gear into the truck, a cop ran up waving his arms, shouting for us to stop, to answer questions, to explain. I heard him like he was underwater. I kept my eyes on the truck bed, on the concrete, on anything that wasn't the river. The crowd kept leaning over the railing. Somewhere below, the whistle drifted up, thin and satisfied, like a person humming after a meal. I slammed the truck door and locked it, even though locks don't mean shit to a bridge. Carlos sat in the passenger seat, trembling. He held his burned hands out in front of him like he didn't trust them attached to his body. I started the engine. The sound of it felt like life, like control. In the side mirror, I saw the pedestrian railing and the shoes hanging there, swinging gently in the wind. They looked like bait. They looked like warnings. They looked like a fucking joke nobody should ever laugh at. We pulled out while sirens screamed closer and people shouted behind us. As we rolled onto the exit ramp, the wind shifted and I heard it one more time, clear as day, threading up through the steel ribs. A whistle, a question, and my throat tightened because my brain, stupid and human, wanted to answer back without thinking. Wanted to prove it couldn't be scared by a sound. I bit down until I tasted blood and kept my mouth shut. I drove like an idiot for the first 5 minutes, too fast on surface streets, turning without signaling, doing anything to keep the bridge out of my mirrors. Carlos kept making this low sound in his throat like he was trying to swallow pain. Every bump in the road jolted his burned hands, and he'd flinch so hard his whole torso tightened. Sirens came up behind us at one point, and my heart tried to tear out of my chest. It was an ambulance, not for us, headed toward the bridge. I still gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white. Carlos finally said, "Pull over." "No," I said. "Eli, pull over. I'm gonna throw up." I took the next right into a gas station and slid into a spot beside the dumpster, far enough away from people that nobody would get curious. Carlos kicked the door open and leaned out, gagging dry because there wasn't anything in him. He'd been running on coffee and nicotine like the rest of us. I got out too, not to help, just because I couldn't sit still. My legs were buzzing like they'd been plugged into a socket. I paced between the pump and the dumpster, trying not to look at the little drainage ditch behind the building because it had water in it and my brain was being an asshole. Carlos sat on the curb, hands held out, palms up like he was presenting them to a judge. "Let me see," I said. He shook his head. "No, don't touch me." I crouched anyway, careful. The glove rubber had fused in places. The skin on his palms looked slick and raw, like the top layer had been peeled away. Angry red with white patches where it had blistered and broken. "You need a hospital," I said. He barked a laugh. "So I can tell him I got burned by a rope that got mad?" "Just say friction," I said. "It wasn't friction," he snapped. His voice cracked on it. He stared at me like I'd betrayed him by trying to make it normal. "You felt it. You fucking felt it." I did. The rope had run hot in a wet way that made no sense. like the fibers had been soaked in boiling water, like something had been inside it and didn't want Carlos to stop the slide. A minivan pulled in at the other pump. A woman got out with a toddler on her hip. Carlos lowered his hands, suddenly aware of being watched. "Go inside," I said. "Wash them under cool water." He stood, swayed, then walked toward the bathroom with his shoulders tight, like he expected something to grab him from behind. I stayed outside, leaning against my truck, staring at the road. My gear bags were in the bed under a tarp. The laminated card was in my pocket. Dean's clipboard sheet with the torn circle around 7 was jammed in my bag. I should have called 911. I should have turned around. I should have stayed to give statements and be helpful. Instead, I'd run, and I didn't regret it, not even a little, because I could still feel that bridge in my nervous system like a handprint. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Same number. I didn't answer. Carlos came back out, hands wrapped in paper towels, face paler. "Don't answer it," he said. "I'm not," I said, and then my phone buzzed again, and the screen lit up with the same number, and I got a flash of dumb anger. At the cops, at the city, at Dean, at myself, like anger could scrub away fear. I answered. "Yeah," I said. Static filled my ear. Not normal cell static. A thick hiss that sounded like water moving through a pipe. Then Dean's voice came through, calm as a guy asking for a status update. "Eli." My stomach folded. I pulled the phone away from my ear like I could avoid the sound physically. The screen still showed the unknown number. Carlos's eyes were locked on my face, already knowing. I didn't say anything. I didn't hang up either. I just stood there while that hiss filled the line. "Eli," the voice said again. Patient, like it had all day. Carlos stepped in close and slapped the phone out of my hand. It hit the asphalt and bounced. The call didn't disconnect. The speaker turned on with the impact, and Dean's voice came out loud between us, echoing in the gas station air like a sick joke. A guy by the ice machine turned his head, annoyed, like we were playing a prank. Carlos stomped the phone. Hard. Once. Twice. The screen spiderwebbed. The voice stuttered, broke into a whistle-like tone for half a second, and then the call finally dropped. Carlos stood there breathing hard, shaking his head over and over like he was trying to shake water out of his ears. "You hear that?" he said. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. We got back in the truck and drove again. Carlos kept his broken hands in his lap like they were fragile packages. I kept my eyes on the road and refused to glance toward any water. It's stupid how much water is everywhere once you start noticing it. Puddles, drainage ditches, rivers you cross without thinking. Even the dark patches of oil on asphalt looked wet enough to make my skin crawl. My phone was dead. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. By the time we hit the shop, there were already company trucks outside and a couple of suits standing around like vultures with lanyards. People were talking in clusters. Nobody laughed. The air felt tight. Dean's truck was still there. His hard hat sat on the dash. A half-empty energy drink in the cup holder. Normal shit that made what happened feel impossible. Our ops manager, Kevin, met us at the bay door. Kevin wasn't a bad guy, but he had that company softness that comes from being paid to make problems disappear. "What the fuck happened?" he demanded, eyes wide. He didn't say Dean's name yet. Like if he didn't say it, it might not be real. Carlos held up his hands. The paper towels were already soaking through with watery blood. Kevin flinched. "We need a hospital," Kevin said. Carlos shook his head hard. "No hospitals. Not yet. Not until we talk." "Talk," Kevin snapped. "There are police asking for you. The city's calling. Dean's wife is calling. We don't say his name." Carlos cut in. Kevin stared like he'd just been punched. "What are you talking about?" I finally forced words out. "We need to do this in a room. Closed door. No radios." Kevin looked around like he was trying to decide if we'd lost our minds. Then he saw my face and Carlos's hands, and something in him shifted. He jerked his head toward the conference room. We went in and shut the door. Kevin pulled the blinds down like it was suddenly important nobody see in. The room smelled like stale coffee and whiteboard markers. Kevin leaned on the table. Start. I reached into my chest pocket and pulled out the laminated card. I didn't slide it across the table like a dramatic reveal. I just set it down like a thing that had weight. Kevin frowned, picked it up, skimmed the first lines. Is this a joke? He said, but his voice wasn't confident. Carlos said, don't read it out loud. Kevin's eyes snapped up. Jesus Christ. Just don't, I said. Look at it. Then shut up and listen. Kevin read silently, face changing a millimeter at a time. Skepticism fading, unease taking its place. He hit the Anchor 7 line, and his gaze flicked to me like he was hoping I'd say this was all bullshit. I didn't. Kevin put the card down, gently like it might bite him. Okay, he said. Okay, so you guys found an old superstition card, and you... Dean clipped into 7. Carlos said, voice flat. He whistled. Something answered. He counted. He went over. Kevin stared at Carlos for a long time, then looked at me. Eli, he said quietly, tell me you didn't let him fall. My throat tightened. Anger flashed hot and sharp, but it didn't have anywhere to go. He wasn't falling like a normal fall, I said. It was like he was being lowered. I grabbed him. The harness pulled back. Kevin's face went gray. That's not. Yeah, Carlos said. It's not. Kevin paced once, then stopped. His voice dropped. Police want statements. City wants statements. If you tell them this, they'll eat you alive. They'll call you incompetent. They'll call you negligent. They'll. I know, I said. I'm not saying it. Kevin exhaled, rubbing his forehead like he had a headache already forming. Then tell me what you were saying. I looked at the card. The last line stared back at me like a dare. We say rope failure, I said. We say he got complacent. We say we tried to arrest the line, and it burned through gloves, and we failed. Carlos made a harsh sound. That makes us look like amateurs. Kevin snapped. Better amateurs than lunatics. You want to go on record saying the bridge talks back? You want to say the river answered a whistle? They'll drag you through court, and you'll never work again. Carlos's jaw clenched so hard I heard teeth grind. He wanted to fight. He wanted to be honest. He wanted the world to behave. I wanted those things too, but I also wanted to be alive. Kevin reached for the card again, then stopped like his hand didn't want to touch it. What do you want me to do with this? He asked. Nothing, I said. Don't keep it. Don't show it to anyone. Don't copy it. Carlos nodded. And don't throw it away. Kevin scoffed. Why the hell not? Rule about shoes, Carlos said, and his voice shook a little. It says don't throw things in the water. Kevin stared at him. I said just don't. Trust me. Kevin sat down hard like his knees gave out. He pressed his palms to his eyes. This is insane, he whispered. Carlos said no. It's the opposite. It's too fucking real. There was a knock at the conference room door. A hard knock. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Kevin flinched. That's the cops. Carlos looked at me, eyes wide, because the rhythm was wrong. My throat went bone dry. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I waited. The knock came again, same pattern. Kevin stood up, angry now, yanking the door open like anger was armor. It was our receptionist, Jenna, standing there with her eyes red. Police are here, she said, and a guy from the city. They're asking for those too. Kevin closed the door gently, like he didn't want to make noise. He looked at us like he was seeing 2 different realities and couldn't decide which one to step into. You two sit, he said. I'll go talk first. Don't say his name, Carlos warned, and that made Kevin's mouth tighten like he wanted to tell Carlos to shut up. But he didn't. He just nodded, fast, and left. The moment the door clicked shut, Carlos said, We're fucked. We're not, I said, but I didn't believe it. Carlos stared at his hands. My palms look like meat. That rope did that. You know what it'll do to our lives if we pretend it was friction? They'll ask why we didn't have better gloves, why we didn't have a backup line, why we didn't. They'll ask anyway, I said. They'll ask 1,000 questions until they find something to blame. But if we tell them the truth, they'll just pick a different kind of blame. Carlos's eyes flicked up. What if we don't say anything? What if we just leave? And go where? I snapped. The edge of my voice surprised me. You think the bridge gives a shit where you go? Carlos swallowed. His face did that thing where a person looks like they're about to cry, and then it turns into anger, because crying feels like losing. I pulled my gear bag onto the table and unzipped it. I dug out the shoe-eyed bag from under the deck. The kid's sneaker, still zipped in its trash bag. I set on the table. Carlos stared. "Why do you still have that?" "Because it said bag it," I said. "Because I didn't want it in the river." Carlos leaned forward, then stopped like he didn't want to touch it either. "Open it." "I don't want to," I admitted. "Open it," he repeated, voice hard. I unzipped the trash bag and peeled it back just enough to look. The sneaker was lighter than it should have been. It sagged weird. The inside wasn't just empty. It was lined. A pale film, like something had dried inside it and left a shell. And at the toe, deep in the fabric, there was a small, hard shape. I shook the shoe gently, trying to dislodge it without putting my fingers in. Something clicked inside. I grabbed a pin off the conference table and used it to pry the shoe open. A tiny bone rolled out onto the table. Not a whole foot bone, just a little curved piece. Like a kid's toe bone. Carlos made a sound like he'd been punched. I stared at it, feeling my brain trying to detach so it didn't have to process this. Not a prank, not a superstition, not a ghost story. Evidence. We were hanging under a bridge where people fell, and I was staring at a bone on a cheap conference room table. Carlos whispered, "Bag it back." I did. I shoved the bone back into the shoe with the pin, sealed the trash bag, and shoved it deep into my gear bag like I could bury it in zippers. The door opened, and Kevin came back in, face tight, trying to wear authority. "They want you in the lobby," he said. "One at a time." Carlos stood first. "No." Kevin stared. "Carlos." "No." Carlos said again. "You go tell them to come in here if they want us." Kevin's eyes flashed. "That's not how this works." Carlos stepped closer, hands clenched despite the pain. "You want to play how this works when a man just got taken off a bridge in daylight?" Kevin's jaw worked. He hated being challenged, but this time the challenge had weight. He exhaled through his nose. "Fine, I'll bring them." And then, like the world wanted to keep making the day worse, Kevin glanced down at the laminated card still on the table. He picked it up, eyes drawn to it like it was magnetic, and he read the first line out loud, barely above a mumble. "Don't whistle." Carlos exploded. "What did I just say?" Kevin flinched and snapped his mouth shut like he'd bitten his tongue. In the silence that followed, we all heard it. A thin whistle. Not in the room, not from events. From the far corner, near the filing cabinets, so soft you could pretend it was nothing if you wanted to lie to yourself. Kevin's face drained. Carlos's eyes went wide. I didn't move. I didn't breathe through my mouth. I stared at the table and waited. The whistle faded like it was satisfied. Kevin set the card down like it was burning him. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. I'm not okay. I'm not reading that again." Carlos's laugh was ugly. "Nosleep." A few minutes later, 2 cops and a city rep came into the conference room. The city guy wore a polo with the department logo and had a binder like paper could control reality. The cops were polite at first. They asked us to walk through what happened. Their questions were normal. Rigging, anchor points, safety checks, sequence of events. The city guy asked about liability and procedure like he was reading a script. Every time somebody said Dean's name, my stomach did a little twist. Every time somebody asked, "Did he say anything before he went over?" I felt the urge to clam my hands over my ears. Carlos kept his answers short. Mechanical. No extra. His voice shook, but he didn't break. I kept mine even shorter. Yes. No. Not sure. I didn't see a failure. I saw him go over. The city guy asked which anchor point Dean clipped into. For half a second, my brain flashed the number 7, so bright it felt like a physical thing in my skull. And under that flash, there was an urge, sick and irrational, to say it out loud, to get it out of my head, to make the world acknowledge it. I bit my tongue again, tasting blood. "I don't know," I said. "We had multiple points in use." The city guy narrowed his eyes. "You don't know what anchor your supervisor clipped into." I held his gaze. There was a lot going on. The cop leaned forward. "Did you see him lose balance? Did he slip? No, I said. It wasn't like that. The room went quiet. Carlos stared at me like he was warning me not to go further. I backed up. He didn't stumble. He leaned, like he decided. The city guy scribbled something in his binder, and I hated the sound of the pen on paper. It sounded like counting. They asked if we heard anything unusual, any warnings, any strange sounds. Carlos said no. I said just traffic. The city guy asked, did anyone whistle? Workers, bystanders. My chest tightened. Carlos's eyes flicked to mine. No, I said, and my mouth felt like it was lying through a mouthful of ash. They left eventually because they couldn't get blood out of a stone and they didn't know where to look for the truth. Kevin promised paperwork, promised cooperation, promised anything he could promise. When the door closed behind them, Carlos sagged like somebody cut a rope. I can't do this, he said. You can't, I said. You already did. Carlos stared at the table, then reached out with one ruined hand and slid the laminated card toward me. You keep it, he said. I didn't want it. That was the problem. It felt like holding a live wire. You found it, Carlos said. It likes you. It doesn't like anyone, I snapped. Then I lowered my voice because I hated the way loudness felt in that room now. It just wants. Carlos's jaw clenched. It got him. It tried to get you. It burned me for touching the rope. You think it's done? I didn't answer because my body already knew the answer and it was yes. Not done. Kevin asked us to go home, to rest. He said he'd handle the city. He said he'd talk to Dean's family. He said a lot of things managers say when the ground under them is cracking. I drove home alone. Carlos refused a ride. He didn't want to be in a truck with gear. He didn't want to be near me. I didn't take it personally. Fear makes you superstitious fast. On the way, I hit a stoplight near a canal. The water was still, flat, sun reflecting off it like a coin. My throat tightened, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. I went home and did what I always do after a job. I stripped my gear. I checked it. I cleaned it. Except I couldn't. I stood over my harness like it was an animal that might bite. The back strap, where the cold had started, was damp. Not soaked, not dripping, just damp like somebody had pressed a wet hand against it. I stared at it for a long time, trying to come up with a normal explanation. Sweat, morning dew, condensation from the river air, anything. Then I touched it. Cold, not room temperature damp, river cold. I jerked my hand back and wiped it on my jeans like a kid touching slime. The urge to look, really look, at the harness, to flip it over, to inspect every strap was huge. My brain wanted to find source. A leak, a reason. Rule 5 screamed. If it's wet, don't check. Freeze. Climb without looking down. Climb. I wasn't on rope. There was nothing to climb. So I froze. Standing in my kitchen with my harness on the floor, hands hovering, heart hammering like I was still under the bridge. Then my phone buzzed. New phone. Kevin had made sure we had replacements for communication. The company paid. Like money could buy a different reality. The caller ID said, Dean Waters. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't saved his number. I didn't even have his number. He was my supervisor. Company phones. Group texts. Everything through Kevin. There was no way for his name to appear like that. My thumb hovered over reject. My throat locked. The phone buzzed again. Same name. My mouth watered like I was about to puke. I didn't answer. The phone buzzed a third time, and I didn't answer, and then it stopped. I stood there breathing through my nose, staring at the silent screen, waiting for a whistle to rise out of the speaker. Nothing. I put the phone in a drawer and shut it like that would help. Then the drawer knocked. Talp, talp, talp. 3. Pause. Talp, talp, talp. I slammed the drawer shut harder, like force would win. The knocking stopped. I backed away from the kitchen counter and nearly tripped over my gear bag. The zipper pull glinted. The bag looked wrong, like it was swollen. I crouched and unzipped it just enough to look inside. The trash bag with the sneaker was wet. Not on the outside. Inside, around the shoe, like it had been sitting in a puddle. I snapped the bag closed and shoved it back down like I was shoving something back into the river. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, lights on, TV playing with the volume low because loud noise felt like an invitation. I stared at nothing and listened to my house settle. Every little click made my skin jump. At around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed in the drawer again. I didn't open it. I heard the faintest whistle from somewhere outside, so soft it could have been whined through a crack. It wasn't windy. I sat there with my hands gripping my knees, breathing through my nose, and waited for morning like a man waiting for sentence. The next day, Kevin called and told me the city was demanding our full rigging logs and photos. He told me there would be an internal review. He told me to keep my story straight. Then he said, too casually, and Dean's wife wants to talk to you. My stomach dropped. No, I said. Kevin sighed. Ellie. No, iropara. Don't give her my number. She already has it, Kevin said, and there was a pause where I could hear him realizing the mistake as he said it. She's calling everyone. I felt cold spread between my shoulder blades, phantom river water. Kevin, I said, voice low. How? Kevin hesitated. I don't know. She's grieving. It's not her, I said, and I hated how sure I sounded. Kevin's voice got sharp. Don't start with that shit. We can't afford. The line crackled. Not like normal phone crackle, like a thick hiss. Then Dean's voice slid in under Kevin's, quiet, patient. Ellie. Kevin stopped mid-word. For a long second, neither of us spoke. I held my breath. I could hear Kevin breathing, and I could hear something else behind it, like water moving through a pipe. Kevin whispered, "What the fuck was that?" I didn't answer because if I answered, I'd have to name it, and naming it felt like agreement. Kevin said, "Louder, Eli." I hung up. I sat there staring at my phone like it was alive. Then my email pinged on my laptop. Subject line, Incident Report, East Tower Event. The sender was the city. Official address. PDF attached. My hand shook as I opened it. My brain screamed not to, because reading felt like counting, like acknowledging, like agreeing. But I opened it anyway, because curiosity is another kind of yes. The report was dry. Cold. The kind of language that sterilizes horror. Supervisor fell from pedestrian walkway. Possible rope system failure. Investigation ongoing. Anchor point under review. Then, in the middle of the report, there was a photo. A close-up of the anchor plate. And you could see it clear as day. Dean's carabiner clipped into Anchor 7. My breath caught. Beneath the photo, somebody had typed, Anchor 7 designated as point of failure. I felt a sick laugh bubble up and die in my throat. They were going to blame the hardware, the metal, the city's plate. They were going to issue a statement, replace a bolt, put up more warning signs, and tell the public it was fixed. And whatever lived under that bridge was going to keep waiting. The PDF had another attachment, a scanned copy of Dean's last job notes. My stomach clenched because I knew what it would be before I opened it. It was the sheet from his clipboard. 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 circled so hard it tore. The exact sheet I had shoved in my bag. My skin prickled. My mouth went dry. I got up too fast, chair scraping the floor, and ran to my gear bag. I yanked it open and dug through until I found the paper. It was still there. So how the hell was it also in the city's email? I stared at it, trying to make sense, and then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The torn circle around 7 wasn't just a tear. The paper was damp there. The ink had bled slightly, making the circle look like it had been drawn in water. And in the damp patch, pressed into the paper like a fingerprint, was a faint pattern of 3 lines. 3 vertical slashes. The same rhythm as the knocks. The same shape as the shoe knots on the railing. The way the laces crossed. My stomach rolled. I dropped the paper like it burned. My brain tried to do what it always does when something impossible happens. It searched for a trick, a coincidence, a hack, a glitch. But my body didn't care about explanations. My body only cared that the bridge could reach into my life through paper and electronics and water. Kevin called again. I didn't answer. Dean's wife called. I didn't answer. A number I didn't recognize called 3 times. I didn't answer. I went into my bathroom and turned on the shower because I wanted to prove to myself that water could be normal, that I could stand in it without thinking of the river. The second the water hit my back, I flinched so hard I nearly slipped. The sensation matched the harness too closely. Cold, sliding, creeping. I killed the water and stood there dripping, breathing through my nose like I was under the deck again. I didn't shower for 2 days after that. I wiped down with a rag like an old man afraid of drowning in his own bathroom. On the third day, I went into the shop because Kevin demanded we come in for a debrief. He wanted to control the story before lawyers got involved. He wanted to keep everyone calm by acting like calm was a thing you could schedule. Carlos was there, hands wrapped in gauze now. He looked exhausted, not just physically, like he'd been fighting his own mind in a small room. Kevin had HR sitting in, a woman named Pam who smiled too much and said, "We're here to support you." Like support was a form you filled out. Kevin started talking about OSHA and insurance and protecting the company. He said we had to write statements. He said we had to be consistent. He said we had to avoid speculation. Carlos cut him off. "Tell them to stay away from that bridge." Pam blinked. "Carlos, I'm sorry, stay away how?" Carlos leaned forward. "Don't send anyone back." Kevin snapped. "We don't get to decide that. The city owns it." "Then tell the city," Carlos said. "Tell them to shut it down." Kevin's face tightened. "With what justification?" "Your feelings." Carlos's eyes flashed. "With the fact Dean's gone." Kevin slammed his palm on the table. "Dean is dead, Carlos. Say it." Carlos's face went rigid. He swallowed hard like the words scraped him. "I'm not saying it," Carlos whispered. Pam frowned, confused. "What?" I watched the room, watching their faces. They were seeing two traumatized workers and a manager trying to manage. They weren't seeing the thing in the water. I said carefully, "We're not talking about him like he's available." Kevin scoffed. "Oh my God, don't start." Carlos's voice rose. "Kevin, you heard on the phone." Kevin froze. Pam looked between us. "Heard what?" Kevin's jaw worked. He didn't want to say it. He didn't want to admit anything that sounded crazy. Carlos leaned back, shaking his head. "Fine," he said. "Pretend. Write your statements. Keep your job. I don't give a shit." He stood up, pushed his chair back with a screech, and walked out. Kevin shouted after him, "Carlos, sit down." Carlos didn't. Pam turned to me, voice gentle in that HR way that makes you want to punch a wall. "Eli, you seem grounded. Can you tell us what Carlos is afraid of?" I stared at her and realized how impossible this was. How insane it sounded to say, "A bridge wants you to agree." It answers whistles. It gets your harness what to make you look down. So I gave her the only truth I could give without opening my mouth too wide. "I think we shouldn't send anyone back," I said. Kevin snapped. "We're not sending anyone back. The city is. And they'll ask for our help," I said. "And if you send people, you're going to lose more than a contract." Kevin leaned in, voice low and angry. "You want to tell me how to run a company? You want to take on that liability? Because if you start talking about superstitions, you'll end up in court and you'll never work again. And you'll drag us with you." I stared at him. "You think I give a fuck about working right now?" Pam said, "Eli." Kevin cut her off. "No, let him talk. Because he's about to cost us everything." That was the moment anger finally found target. I pulled the laminated card out of my pocket and slapped it on the table. Kevin flinched like it was a snake. Pam's smile vanished. Her eyes went wide as she read the first lines silently. "Don't read it out loud," I said. Pam's mouth opened, then closed. She swallowed. Kevin's voice was hard. "Where did you get that?" "I found it in the maintenance cabinet," I said. "It was there for a reason." Pam read down. Her eyes hit anchor 7 and she stopped. She looked up at me. "Is this real?" I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You tell me." Pam sat back slowly like the chair had moved on its own. She didn't look at the card anymore. She stared at the wall like she was trying not to picture anything. Kevin said, "This is garbage. This is..." The conference room door knocked. Top, top, top. Pause. Top, top, top. Pam jerked like she'd been shocked. Kevin froze mid-sentence. My mouth went dry. I stared at the table. Kevin whispered, "That's someone outside." The knocks came again, same rhythm. Pam's eyes were wide. Kevin stood, jaw tight, and yanked the door open like he was about to fight whoever was there. The hallway was empty. No one, just fluorescent lights, humming, and the faint smell of coolant from the warehouse. Kevin stood there, breathing hard. Pam covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't move. Kevin closed the door slowly. He didn't slam it this time. He set the latch like he didn't want to make noise. He came back to the table, and his voice was different now. Less loud, less sure. "Okay," he said. "So, what do you want?" I didn't say what I wanted. What I wanted was for it to have never happened. But I knew what I needed. "I don't want that card in this building," I said. "I don't want it in my house either." Kevin's eyes flicked to it. "Then throw it away." I shook my head. "No," Pam whispered. "Why not?" I looked at her. "Because the water keeps what you give it." Pam's face tightened like she wanted to argue, but didn't know how. Kevin said, "Then what?" I thought about the last line again. "I want you to say yes." I said, "I'm getting it away from me." Kevin rubbed his face hard. "Just take your time off." "Paid. Wheel." "There's no paid time off for this," I said. I took the laminated card and slid it back into my pocket. I stood up. Kevin said, "Eli, do not talk about this to anyone. Do you understand me?" I stared at him. "I'm not talking," I said. "That's the point." I walked out. In the parking lot, my truck looked normal. Tires, ruched boots, mud on the wheel wells, a coffee cup on the dash. I got in and sat with my hands on the steering wheel and realized I didn't want to drive near any water, which is impossible because cities are built around water like it's a vein. My phone buzzed. Dean Waters. I didn't answer. I didn't reject it either. I held the phone in my palm and watched it buzz until it stopped. Then, without thinking, I opened my glove compartment. A sneaker sat inside. Not the one in my gear bag. A different one. Adult size. Dirty. What did the heel like it had just stepped out of a puddle? My breath caught. My skin crawled. I slammed the glove compartment shut so hard it popped back open a little, and I heard the faintest tapping sound from inside it, like the shoe was knocking to be let out. Talp, talp, talp. 3. Pause. Talp, talp, talp. My hand shook so hard I could barely get the compartment shut again. I sat there, heart hammering, and felt the urge to count the taps, to confirm the pattern, to make it real. I bit down on my tongue and tasted blood. That's when I decided the card couldn't stay with me. Not in my pocket, not in my house, not in my truck, because it wasn't just a warning anymore. It felt like a leash. I went to a shipping store that afternoon. The kind with brown boxes stacked to the ceiling and bored teenagers behind the counter. I bought a plain envelope. I wrote my own address on it in my normal handwriting, no return address. My hand shook while I did it. I put the laminated card inside. For half a second, right before I sealed it, I hesitated, because sealing it felt like saying yes to something, like making it official. Then I thought of Dean's smile right before he went over. I remembered a promise look. I licked the strip and sealed the envelope. The teenage clerk took it, slapped postage on it, dropped it into the outgoing bin with 100 other normal letters. Bills, Christmas cards, divorce paperwork, normal life. I walked out feeling like I just mailed a bomb. On the drive home, I passed the river by accident. There's a stretch of road where you can't avoid it. The bridge was visible in the distance, steel ribs in the sun. My throat tightened, and without thinking my lips pursed, like my body wanted to whistle back in pure stupid reflex. Like a little kid calling into a tunnel to hear an echo. I forced my mouth flat and swallowed hard until the urge passed. That night, I slept for maybe an hour in bursts. Every time I drifted off, I dreamed of my harness getting wet and the cold crawling up my spine. At some point, I woke up to tapping. Not my window, not my door, from inside my walls. Talp, talp, talp. Pause. Talp, talp, talp. I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, and stared at the ceiling like if I stared hard enough, I could pin reality down. The tapping moved. It shifted through the wall cavity like something crawling along studs, finding where the drywall was thin, Then I heard in my closet a soft scrape, a faint wet rustle. I didn't get up. I didn't open anything. I lay still and breathed through my nose like a trapped animal. Eventually it stopped. Morning came gray and dull, and I felt like I'd aged 10 years in one night. 2 days later, the envelope arrived in my mailbox. Plain, no return address. My own handwriting on the front, which made my stomach twist like I'd received a letter from a dead version of myself. I stared at it for a long time with the mailbox open, wind blowing cold, neighbors walking dogs. Normal life happening around me like an insult. I carried it inside with 2 fingers like it was contaminated. I set it on my kitchen table. I didn't open it, because opening it felt like agreeing to receive it. I stood there staring at it and realized how stupid that sounded. How insane. But I also realized insanity didn't matter. Consequences did. My phone buzzed again. Dean Waters. I didn't answer. The envelope sat there. Then slowly it slid. Not like the table was tilted. Not like a draft pushed it. It slid an inch toward the edge, deliberate. My breath caught. My skin went cold. It slid again. Another inch. Like a hand was pushing it from inside. My mouth went dry. My tongue pressed against my teeth. My brain screamed, "Don't touch it. Don't open it. Don't count the inches." The envelope reached the edge and teetered. I lunged and slapped it flat with my palm. Cold bit through the paper. River cold. I jerked my hand back, swearing. The envelope was damp under my palm, like it had been sitting in water. There was a wet stain blooming through the paper now, spreading like a bruise. And in the middle of that stain, pressed into the paper fibers like a seal, were 3 faint vertical slashes. I backed away from my own kitchen table like it was an altar. That was the moment I understood something that made my stomach drop. Mailing it didn't move it away from me. It moved it in a circle, like the bridge loved circular things. Loops, ropes, knots, laces, harness straps. It wanted me to keep handling it. It wanted me to keep engaging. So I did the next thing I could think of that didn't involve throwing it in water or burning it in my own house like an idiot. I put the envelope in a bigger envelope. Then I put that in a box. Then I taped the box shut until it looked like I was shipping a brick. I drove it out of town. I didn't go near the river. I didn't take the highway that crossed the bridge. I took back roads and industrial routes like I was avoiding a predator's territory. I ended up at a landfill 2 counties over. The kind of place that smells like rot and diesel and heat. Seagulls circling like they own the sky. Mountains of broken furniture and ripped carpet and drywall, stacked like the ruins of a different civilization. I parked in a dusty lot and sat there for a full minute, staring at the box on my passenger seat. This was insane. I knew that. Every part of me knew that. But my spine still remembered cold and sunlight. My ears still remembered a whistle answering back. I carried the box to the edge where people dumped construction debris. I found a spot behind a pile of broken sheetrock and wet insulation where nobody would look. I dug with my hands until my nails split. The dirt was packed with trash, shards of glass, old nails. I didn't care. I shoved the box into the hole. For a second, my brain tried to count the shovelfuls of dirt I threw back on top of it. I bit my tongue hard enough to make my eyes water and force myself to dump dirt without rhythm, without pattern. I covered it with broken drywall and chunks of tile until it was just another scar in a place full of scars. Then I stood there breathing hard, sweating in the cold, and listened. The landfill was loud. Machines, birds, wind. Underneath it, in the back of my mind, I expected a whistle. Nothing came. I drove home feeling not safe, but quieter. For about a week, things calmed down. The calls stopped. The tapping faded. I slept more than an hour at a time. Kevin emailed saying the city was replacing the East Plate, saying they were addressing the hardware failure, saying OSHA wanted our logs. Carlos quit, just stopped answering. Kevin told me Carlos dropped his gear off in the middle of the night, left it at the shop door like an offering. Dean's funeral happened. I didn't go. Kevin tried to guilt me. Dean's wife called crying. I didn't answer. I hated myself for that, but every time I thought about hearing his name in a room full of grieving people, I felt that cold on my spine again, like a hand reminding me not to agree. Then one afternoon, I was stopped at a light near the river. Different river, not the same bridge, but water is water, and my nerves didn't care, and I saw something hanging from the overhead street sign. A shoe, a single sneaker tied by its laces, swinging gently above the road like somebody had decorated the city. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might pass out behind the wheel. I kept my eyes forward. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't count the seconds on the crosswalk timer. I didn't look at the river. The light turned green. I drove. I started noticing shoes everywhere after that. Not always tied up. Sometimes just placed too neatly. A child's sandal on a curb like it was waiting for a foot. A work boot in the middle of a parking lot, upright like it had been set there on purpose. Once I opened my back door and there was a wet sneaker on my porch mat, laces knotted in 3 tight loops. I bagged it. I didn't throw it. I didn't look inside. I drove it to a trash facility and tossed it into a dumpster, so big it felt like feeding a whale. The next morning, my harness strap was damp again. Not soaked, just damp enough to remind me it could reach me whenever it wanted. I stopped doing rope work. I told Kevin I was done hanging. He yelled. He threatened. He said I was screwing the company. I didn't care. I took a job in a warehouse doing inventory and maintenance. Concrete floors. No aids. No water. I thought if I stayed on land, I'd be fine. For a while I was. Then I got assigned to count stock. No yoke. That was my job. Count pallets. Count boxes. Count parts. The first day, I stood in aisle 7. Of course it was aisle 7, and stared at a clipboard with a tally sheet. My mouth went dry. My fingers tingled. I could feel the urge to count out loud, rise like nausea. 1, 2, 3. I shut my eyes hard and bit my tongue until I tasted blood. My supervisor asked if I was okay. I nodded too fast. Yeah. He laughed. Don't pass out on me. I forced a smile that probably looked like a grimace, and I walked away from aisle 7. That night, I dreamed of anchor 7. Not the bolt, the idea of it, the way the number felt like a door. I woke up and my back was cold, like river water had poured down my spine in my sleep. I ripped my shirt off and checked the mattress like a lunatic. Dry. My skin was goose-fleshed anyway. I kept going like that for months. Avoiding numbers. Avoiding water. Avoiding anything that felt like a pattern. I stopped listening to songs that had whistling in them. I'd shut off the radio if a tune made my lips want to mimic it. I'd bite my tongue, swallow hard, distract myself with anything. People noticed. Friends asked why I was tense, why I never went near the riverfront, why I wouldn't go to concerts or bars where people whistled. Elite. I said I had anxiety. I said I'd had a bad accident, which was true in the most useless way. Every now and then, I get an email from the city about the bridge. Updates. Repairs completed. New safety measures. Incident closed. One of those emails included a photo of the new anchor plate. They'd replaced it. Different bolts. Different numbers. No siete. Just 1 through 8. But the 7 spot had been relabeled as 9, like renaming a thing changes what it is. I stared at that photo for a long time and felt something inside me laugh. Something that wasn't mine. Because the bridge didn't care what you called it. It cared what you agreed to. A year after Dean went over, I was stuck at a red light near the original river, near the original bridge. I hadn't planned it. Traffic had pushed me there. One detour, one wrong turn, and suddenly the steel ribs were up ahead, cutting the sky. It was late afternoon, wind coming off the water, cars crawling, people walking the pedestrian side like nothing had ever happened. My hands tightened on the steering wheel without me meaning to. The light stayed red too long, like it was teasing me. I kept my eyes on the taillights ahead. I didn't look at the river. I didn't look up at the railings. And then, between the sounds of engines and tires and city life, I heard it. A thin whistle rising from the bridge's underside, soft as breath, threaded through steel like it belonged there. Not angry, not hunting, patient, asking. My throat tightened. My lips twitched with that stupid reflex to answer, to prove I wasn't afraid, to make it stop by acknowledging it. That's how it gets you. Not with force, with the tiny part of you that wants closure. I gripped the wheel harder, breathed through my nose, and kept my mouth shut until the light changed. Because I learned the hard way the worst things don't chase you. They just wait.